Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to our ongoing coverage of the 2024 U.S. elections.
Are you better off now than you were 4 years ago? I don't think so.
You are rightly impatient for change. Just imagine Donald Trump with no guardrail.
This election is a choice between whether we will have 4 more years of incompetence or whether we'll begin the 4 greatest years in the history of our country.
Consequences of him ever being president again are brutally serious.
She's actually not as smart. And we will make America great again.
And when we fight, we win!
45% of voters nationwide have said they had a favorable view of Trump, compared to 46% who said so in Edison's Research's 2020 exit poll. 54% viewed him unfavorably, compared to 52% in 2020. That came as 47% of voters nationwide said they had a favorable view of Harris, compared to 52% who said the same of Biden in Edison Research's 2020 exit poll. 51% viewed her unfavorably, compared to 46% who viewed Biden that way in 2020. 31% of voters nationwide said the economy mattered most in deciding how to vote in the presidential election. 11% said immigration, 34% the state of democracy, and 4% foreign policy. 45% of voters nationwide said their family's financial situation was worse off than it was 4 years ago, compared to 20% who said so in Edison Research's 2020 exit poll. 24% said they were better off than they were 4 years ago, compared to 41% in 2020. 51% of voters nationwide said they trust Trump more to handle the economy. 47% they said they trust Harris more. And Decision Desk HQ has projected Kamala Harris to win Virginia's 13 electoral votes. Since Barack Obama's 2008 victory, Virginia has consistently supported Democratic candidates in presidential elections, while rural parts of the state tend to lean Republican. Urban areas, especially the suburbs around Washington, D.C., remain strongholds for Democrats. In 2020, Joe Biden won Virginia with 54.1% of the vote, compared to Donald Trump's 44%. As the 2024 presidential election unfolds, American voters are making their voices heard at polling stations nationwide. We now go to Raham for further in-depth analysis into the U.S. election process.
As the November elections are upon us, both Democrats and Republicans are facing significant rifts within their parties that could redefine their futures. With Vice President Kamala Harris and former President Donald Trump navigating complex voter sentiment, especially regarding foreign policy and domestic issues, the stakes are higher than ever. The ongoing conflict in Gaza adds another layer of urgency, challenging party unity and influencing voter turnout as candidates grapple with their positions on international crises. As we are here on November 5th, the landscape of American politics feels more fragmented than ever before. Democrats once united behind the leadership of Kamala Harris, but the party now finds itself at a crossroads. Growing chorus of progressives are questioning their party's commitment to bold reforms and feeling increasingly sidelined by moderates who seem more cautious than ever. This sense of alienation raises urgent concerns about the party's direction and its ability to resonate with the younger voter who hold the key to the future. Meanwhile, the Republican Party is grappling with its own internal strife. A deep divide has emerged between traditional conservatives and the populist faction loyal to Trump. Trump influence has shifted the party's focus towards nativism and economic populism, alienating many longtime conservatives who once felt at home in the GOP. Recent primaries have laid bare these fractures, showcasing candidates who often espouse extreme views that risk pushing away moderate voters. Across the political spectrum, many citizens are expressing frustration with the directions of their parties. This discontent has sparked a growing urgency for change as the election looms on the horizon. For Democrats, the challenges lies in rallying behind Harris and harnessing the energy of progressive activists. For Republicans, the struggle is to reconcile Trump's overwhelming influence with the desires of more traditional party members. The stakes are high, with these internal divisions holding the potential to shape voter turnout and influence candidate selection, leading to unexpected outcome for this election. As social issues like immigration and voting rights emerge as a flashpoint, the ability of both parties to present a united front becomes increasingly complicated. Regardless of the election's outcomes, the internal divisions are likely to persist, compelling both parties to reevaluate their identities and strategies moving forward.
The stock of Donald Trump's social media company has been temporarily halted twice after a sudden plunge on election day following a massive surge. Shares of Truth Social owner Trump Media and Technology Group, which trades under the symbol DJT, briefly turned negative after spiking as much as 17% on Tuesday morning. After the stock was halted for volatility, shares began to recover and were last up 4%. The stock gained 12% on Monday and is rebounding from 3 days of steep losses last week. And a federal judge has said he would not order several Georgia counties to reject absentee ballots that were hand-delivered to polling places over the weekend, despite Republican allegations that those ballots were cast improperly. After a nearly 4-hour hearing, Judge Stan Baker said Republicans were cherry-picking when complaining about a few counties where voters had additional hours over the weekend to drop off their ballots, and that the extra time is simply not a substantive disparity. And for further analysis, we are joined from Washington, D.C. by the Professor of Political Science, Dr. Robert Rabel. Welcome, Dr. Rabel, to our special coverage on the U.S. election day. Sir, how did the voter turnout so far compared to the previous elections, at least 4 years ago? And what does it indicate about the public engagement?
All right, there is a couple of things that were kind of puzzling for me and for others. You know, when it comes to Georgia, when it comes to North Carolina and to Virginia, you know, and I think now if you look at Georgia, you know, the vote which has been tabulated at 79%, and he has over 200,000, you know, more votes than Harris Trump. And in North Carolina as well, you know, and already you have over 60% of vote. So really, this is where, you know, these are very important states. These were contested states. And Virginia, I want to tell you something about Virginia. I heard you that you called it. It has been called for. It hasn't been called for yet. So I think that Virginia is right there. I don't know how it's going to go. And more so, as a matter of fact, I will look at Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania, Harris really had kind of a wide gap with Trump. But Trump now, he's catching up with her. And what's interesting also, if you go to Georgia, you know, you have some polls that will say, the independent are going heavily toward the Trump. And that's something we haven't seen 4 years ago. In North Carolina, I would say, yes, but the difference in vote is really huge now. So these are now the surprises. And if he's going to win North Carolina, Georgia, if he's going to catch up with Pennsylvania, it's leaning more toward the Trump as I see it now. It's too early to call, but the way the trend is going, it's now the advantage somehow. I see it as with Trump.
Do you feel that these results so far are indicative of what might be the results for the future states, I mean, such as Pennsylvania, as you've mentioned, because everybody's really focusing on Pennsylvania, saying it will be very critical in how the title race is decided?
Well, yes, Pennsylvania has 19 electoral vote, and of course it is pivotal to both. But if Trump is gonna take more blue states in what's called the blue wall, he might win without the state. And this is something it has been decided, and this is something we are going to follow. Now, what's really kind of caught my attention is the way he's catching up with Harris, especially in Pennsylvania. In Michigan now, true Harris is ahead, but Michigan yet you don't have a lot of votes that have been counted. And more so, as a matter of fact, the difference is not too high. So if I want to follow the trend, and I'm not speaking now about a pattern, I'm speaking about the trend. I see that, the independent votes most likely is going toward Trump. The women vote, which I thought is crucial, it's still crucial, but it's not overtaking the other votes, for example, from the independent, from the males, and from those, as a matter of fact, who are unhappy with what's going on. And they consider Harris, as a matter of fact, as part of the problem since she was the vice president of United States. So really, it's too soon, as I mentioned, to call, but I see trends now moving more in favor of Trump. And really, and you are right, I heard you when you spoke about the economy. The economy still is number one. And he's asking the question, are you better now or you were better, 4 years before? You have, again, the immigration. It weighs heavily on some minds. But also, I want to tell you one thing, especially, when it comes, and I live in Florida, especially when it comes to the families here. If you have still a good number of families, I consider mainly, traditional, quasi-conservative. And what they see that, there is a lot of things happening, really, they feel uncertain about it. And more so, when I speak about it again, some things that the Democrat really did a big mistake, from Clinton to Biden, if you know, especially with the frustration that you mentioned, and I fully agree with you. Whereas Clinton said, listen, who vote for Trump are deplorable, and then Biden said, garbage. This is not a talk, really, especially when you have many Americans are frustrated with what's going on. And this is where Trump's come in. And I know his discourse is not great, but still now they feel that, he's someone probably they could trust more than Harris.
Dr. Rabil, now you've mentioned the independent voters or the undecided voters. Now, you said that they might be leaning more towards Trump. Now, what are the factors that would sway the independent voters one way or the other? Would you think that the polls that were made earlier would be indicative of how the independent voters or the unenthusiastic voters leaning towards one candidate rather than the other?
I believe that the early voting and the early polls are fairly indicative. Why? Because when we look 4 years ago, really the independent votes you did not have a big difference, between Trump and Biden. Now you have a big difference. Mainly you have now more votes cast for Trump. And this is why I see it as a variable, and a variable that is somehow, I believe, it's playing out in different states. And the main factor, I think myself, is unhappiness, frustration, and uncertainty. Listen, I I am father and I have children. And I know that inflation has affected me. And thank you, God, I live well. But I know many of my neighbors and I know many of the family of my wife who are from the Midwest. They are absolutely unhappy. The inflation is high. They believe that United States is very much engaged in many wars. They are paying lots of money to Ukraine. And really, and of course, you have a lot of illegal immigration happening now. So I think that the aggregate or the cumulative effect of all these factors have given an edge favoring Trump, from the independent. This is what I come now to see, and I feel that, I'm comfortable saying I can safely argue, this.
So now, we've spoken about the importance of the economy to shift and direct the voters. Now, still also speaking about the general voters and the independent voters as well. What other major issues that could shape the election outcome? We can think of, or we can mention gun control, immigration, reproductive rights. Are these issues also shaping the election outcome?
As a matter of fact, the abortion issue and reproductive rights, these are very important. And as a matter of fact, I am really I'm confounded why I am not seeing more votes by women toward Harris. I really don't know what's going on, and probably it's going to take some time to figure it out, really, why I don't see more vote. Because I expected, the women vote is going to be a very definitive vote, very strong vote. Now, I am not sure about it. And of course, you have the immigration. The immigration, really, it weighs heavily on many. Let's not forget, from Arizona to Nevada to Florida, to many states, really, it weighs heavily. And I live in Florida and I know how they feel about it. Although you have a good number of Hispanic here. So yes, you have other issues. But all these issues, as a matter of fact, Trump has been successful in one way. He has hammered into the minds of Americans, regular Americans, ordinary Americans, really blue-collar workers and some white-collar workers, that really what's happening is not good, and United States is not doing good, and you have a lot of things that Harris and Biden, of course, they did bad. And he helped to create. Already you have the uncertainty. But also, I believe that he has created some kind of an environment of uncertainty. And somehow the American voter now, I feel that, and I speak with them as a professor, as someone who does a lot of forums and seminar, I feel that they look at Trump and they feel, something, we know he is probably not the ideal candidate, but we trust him more than Harris to fix the situation at home. And I am leaning toward more believing in that.
Mm-hmm. So now, if we look at the future political dynamics within the United States, are there any significant changes in political alignments within the Senate or the House based on the anticipated results?
Well, as a matter of fact, we're going to look in the Senate. In the Senate, the Republican picked up one vote, from West Virginia. So we are going to see that. And I would like to follow it to see, yes. So in the balance of power, I would like to see what's going to happen in the Senate and the House. And I am before I didn't think it might happen. Now I am leaning more toward it could happen, where the Republican might pick up another vote and they will control, the Senate. The House, I think most likely it will remain with Democratic hands.
Doctor, now, what about the two main parties, the Democrats and the Republicans? How are the results likely to affect the key policy agendas for the winning party over the next few years? Will they strengthen them? Will they try and diversify them or alter them or change them?
Well, okay, I would like to see that Trump, if he becomes president, or Harris, if she becomes president, I would like to bring, kind of a, people from the other party, Republican, American, Democrat, speaking with them. And I still remember, when I was a student at Massachusetts, I still remember Ronald Reagan sitting down with Tip O'Neill. They were, at odds with each other, but they sat down with each other. They had a drink with each other. Today, as a matter of fact, they don't even drink together. They don't even have a meal together. I really would like this to change, because really we have one country, it's United States, and really we have one people. And United States today is facing a lot of challenges within the country and challenges beyond the border of the country. We have the Ukraine war, we have the Middle East, we have the challenge from China, and you have a transition now, really, whether we like it or not. The world is transitioning more toward a multipolar world, not a unipolar world led by United States. So really, United States has a lot of challenges. And one thing, as a matter of fact, I would like to mention here is that I was unhappy that I didn't hear about it in the election discourse, mainly the national debt. If you go back to Reagan, if you go back to Bush, Clinton, Obama, they all spoke about the national debt. It was an issue. Today, as a matter of fact, 2 days ago, you had the report came out. Today, as a matter of fact, the interest on our national debt is more than our defense budget.
Yes.
It's 870 billion. And really, to think about it, why they are not discussing it. So yes, I am worried. I would like them to work together, because if they are not going to work together, we are going to be really a great power in steep decline, not in decline, in steep decline.
Dr. Robert Rabil, the Professor of Political Science, thank you very much, sir, for joining us. Swing states, or the so-called battleground states, play a decisive role in U.S. presidential elections, where close margins and shifting party loyalties shape the race. And joining us now is the Professor of International Relations at the University of Alabama, Dr. G. Davis, to analyze key insights on the U.S. election day. Dr. Davis, thank you for joining us. First, now, what scenarios do you foresee for the losing candidate? Will they play a significant role in the U.S. politics moving forward? Are we anticipating challenging the results, lawsuits? Are we anticipating an embrace of the losing candidate or members of the party of the losing candidate, or a very polarized situation with reports of the U.S. democracy being at risk?
Well, first off, thank you very much for the invitation. It's a great pleasure to be back. And I would expect, given the results that we're seeing, that the person who loses, and right now it's like it will be Harris, in fact, acknowledge that and will concede the election. It probably won't be done tonight. It probably won't be done maybe for a day or two. But as soon as there's any certainty with any of the three states, which would be Wisconsin, Michigan, or Pennsylvania, then we'll see Harris concede, because at that point the election will in fact go to Donald Trump. But I don't see any major opposition or any kind of role really for the losing candidate in the background. America is polarized. America is going through generational change as we speak. But this is just another transition. And one thing you have to remember about American politics is that we have many branches. We have three main branches of government. We have a wide bureaucracy filled with thousands of workers, and they provide an anchor and stability. And regardless of who wins the election, there will mostly be continuity within the American political system. Yeah, we are a polarized society in a sense, but it's not really as much political as it is geographical. It's really the urban centers versus the rural. And in a sense, we have two competing cultures within the United States. And so if you look at the Republican dominant states, even in the major cities, the Democrats won, and in the Democratic dominant states in the countryside, the Republicans won. So really, we have a different split within the United States public than is commonly understood. But I don't see much of a change. In fact, I think we're going to go back to we'll go back to the situation of the Trump years, where we see a president who likes to make a lot of statements that in the end aren't backed up, because there's a big difference between rhetoric and reality. But I do have to say, though, at the same time, it's amazing that this will be the first time since George Bush won 20 years ago that the Republican candidate will likely win the popular vote. So according to the latest estimates of the New York Times, Donald Trump is likely to win the popular vote by 1 to 1.9% over Harris, which nobody really predicted. And so this is a much bigger change, a much bigger victory for Trump than anyone anticipated, if in fact the numbers do hold out. And I would recommend patience, because as we learned in 2020, the results of the first night may in fact be changed by the votes that come in through absentee ballot. But that said, I expect no really substantive changes in the United States, except that we will now have a Republican president. Another major change is the Senate. It was very likely to become a Republican-led, and the House is a grab. So nobody knows if the House will in fact be Democratic or Republican. But in that regard, a major partisan change. But it's hard to argue that the Republicans would have a legitimacy problem if they also win the popular vote as well as the Electoral College. And that's the way the election right now is turning out.
So you've mentioned that the country is going through a generational change. So can you give us a sense of how young voters and first-time voters are responding to the candidates? Support to Ukraine or ending the war in Gaza, or are they mainly concerned about their own domestic issues, healthcare, job opportunities, their own state of the economy?
This is something that actually emerged a few months back, and many people didn't pay attention to it. But young voters in the United States are more likely to vote Republican now than ever before in the past. And the reason is because their job prospects and their financial situation has become worse off. And so all of them, if you go back and take polls nationwide, there is a tendency among young voters to believe that they are worse off under Biden than they were under Trump. And so many of the voters that in the past, historically, the young voters tend to vote much more predominantly for Democratic candidates. These votes now are, in fact, either we're seeing people not voting or a large percentage of voting for Republicans. So within these marginal areas, yeah, I think it's mostly domestic issues. Foreign policy really matters in some sectors, but overall, among the young voters, it's not as significant. It's more of a for, I guess, the elite young, which would be the ones who are attending colleges, we would see a much more, their preferences would be more guided by foreign policy issues, in particular, the war in Gaza, just the general conditions in the Middle East. But for overall, for the young, it's much more economic. And the difficult thing is that the cost of living increases, just the way inflation has hit most Americans. Everyone does in fact feel worse off, even if their salary's gone up, their purchasing power has declined. And if you take away hope from people that they will have a better tomorrow, it's hard then to gain support for the party that's actually in office. I mean, that's the reality. It's predominantly economic issues, and only for a small minority would it be foreign policy issues. But for the Democrats, it was a much bigger problem for them to have the economy decline in the way that it did.
Mm-hmm. And what role would you say did social media and digital campaigns play this year, and have there been notable trends in voter engagement online with the use of AI, customized campaigning for the target voters?
I think that for AI, there was a big difference, and I think both parties were using it. And I think social media played a much bigger role in the 2008 election that saw Barack Obama come to power, because the Democrats used that medium so much better than the Republicans in that election. But going forward, I don't think that either side clearly benefited. And the one major problem with social media, as I'm sure that you're aware of, is that it increases partisanship and it dissolves the middle. And so because of that, because of the algorithms that are present within social media that are driven by AI, people tend to see political posts that coincide with their own and become more entrenched there, and they fail to see the other side. And so the main issue for that is that we have become polarized. And it's harder for, and this is a very big problem within modern democracies, is to try to find a middle ground, a means to compromise, a means to have dialogue and discussion. And that's where social media and even the use of AI really hurts the political process today.
Mm-hmm. So now, in your opinion, what will be the biggest challenges facing the winning candidate, be it Trump or Harris, both domestically and internationally, as they step into office? Will there be new challenges or unforeseen difficulties or obstacles, or will it be just living up to the promises and the pledges they made?
That is going to be a very difficult thing for either candidate. And so this transition now, once there is in fact a winner, what we should see is a major change in rhetoric. And so we would see the president, and again, it could be either Harris or Trump, but it's likely to be Trump, will need to craft a position to present his or her foreign policy to the rest of the world. And so in all of the campaign, they were basically addressing the American domestic audience. Now, as the heir apparent of the presidency, they will have to change their rhetoric and actually now address a global audience, because the role of the president is predominantly within foreign policy. They made a lot of promises on domestic issues, but the reality is that Congress really determines those. And the president has no real authority except for issuing executive orders, but an executive order has no legal basis. So the president's main task will be to create a coherent foreign policy. And the one thing that we should all be aware of is that Donald Trump has 4 years of experience of being president. And so he's probably going to be able to build on that. And if you remember his time as president, in particular, there were major changes in American positions towards the Middle East and towards Europe that were changed in the Biden administration. And so one of the elements will be, and this is very important for the United States, regardless of who is the president, is how to maintain continuity and strengthen our allies and our long-term relationships, regardless of who is president. So we've got to have a clear, coherent vision. And of course, the president now has the main task of forming a cabinet and hiring thousands of people who will become political appointees within the new administration. So they will be very busy, but their rhetoric will change, and they will have a different tone, a whole different dialogue that will be going on with America and the world.
Professor of International Relations at the University of Alabama, Dr. G. Doug Davis, thank you very much, sir, for joining us. And from the economy to immigration, Kamala Harris and Donald Trump offer diverging plans for domestic issues shaping the 2024 U.S. elections. Officials from Harris's campaign have indicated that declaring a winner in the presidential race might take several days, but they're also preparing for potential legal battles that could last for weeks, regardless of the result. Given the close nature of the race and the likelihood of legal disputes, particularly with Republicans having already laid groundwork for challenges, Harris's team has informed donors to anticipate 4 to 6 weeks of mutual lawsuits, according to a senior donor involved in discussions. And in the presidential election, Republican Donald Trump has secured Indiana, Kentucky, and West Virginia, while Democrat Kamala Harris has claimed Vermont, according to Edison research projections, as polls closed in 9 U.S. states, including key battlegrounds Georgia and North Carolina. These early outcomes were anticipated, with the final decision likely hinging on 7 critical states: Georgia, North Carolina, Arizona, Michigan, Nevada, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. Pre-election polls indicated a tight race in these states. Meanwhile, preliminary national exit polls from Edison revealed that nearly 75% of voters feel American democracy is at risk, highlighting widespread concerns after a divisive campaign season. Ladies and gentlemen, by this we conclude our special coverage for the 2024 US elections. Please don't forget to follow Q News on YouTube, Facebook, X, Instagram, and TikTok at Q News EGY to stay informed. I'm Henny Safe. Thanks for watching and stay tuned for more updates on Q News.